Bonjour tout le monde, and welcome back to another French video from Mirai. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at part 2 of le conditionnel passé. Let's begin! Let's begin with a revision of le conditionnel passé. Conditionnel passé is used to express what would have taken place in the past when some other action or situation occurred. It is also used to express a regret or criticism. It is formed by taking the sujet, then avoir or être, the auxiliaries, conjugated in conditionnel présent, then the participe passé of the verb. Here are the participe passés of regular verbs. For ER verbs, it's E with accent aigu. For IR verbs, it's I. And for RE verbs, it's U. In today's video, we are going to be focusing on conditionnel passé with être. If you want to look at how conditionnel passé is conjugated with auxiliary avoir, you can watch my previous video. Before continuing with the lesson, let's look at and review the conjugation of être in conditionnel présent. So it will be je serai, tu serais, il, elle serait, nous serions, vous seriez, il, elle serait. For most of the verbs in French, the auxiliary avoir is used whenever we're conjugating conditionnel passé. However, there are some specific verbs that use the auxiliary être, and we're going to find out which one those are. For verbs a part of the acronym Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp, they use être, and also for reflexive verbs, which are known as les verbes pronominaux. Here are the verbs and their participe passés that are included in the acronym Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. So the verbs are devenir, revenir, which is the doctor part, monter, rester, sortir, which is the Mrs. part. Then we have venir, arriver, naître, descendre, entrer, rentrer, tomber, retourner, aller, mourir, and partir, which make the last part of the acronym Vandertramp. Moving on to the formation of conditionnel passé with auxiliary être. So we have our sujet, je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle. Then we have être conjugated in conditionnel présent, serait, 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 serions, seriez, serait, serait. Then the participe passé of the verb. Let's look at an example with sortir. So we have our sujet, then être conjugated in conditionnel présent, then the participe passé of sortir, which is sorti. So it will be je serai sorti, tu serais sorti, il serait sorti, elle serait sortie, nous serions sortis, vous seriez sortis, il serait sorti, elle serait sortie. Now let's look at how conditional passé is conjugated in the negative form. So the conjugation of être comes after ne and the participe passé comes after pas. So the form would be sujet plus ne plus être conjugated in conditionnel présent plus pas plus the participe passé of the verb. For example, we have je ne serais pas venu. I would not have come. So in this case, our sujet is je, then we add ne, then être conjugated in conditionnel présent, which is serait, then pas, then the participe passé of venir, which is venu. Moving on to conditional passé with reflexive verbs. But before we do that, we need to know what reflexive verbs are. So in this case, the subject and the object of the action is the same. The action reflects back on the person that is doing it. So these are basically actions that are done to oneself. For example, brushing your teeth, sleeping, waking up, etc. You can watch my other video to have more information on reflexive verbs. Here is the formation of reflexive verbs with conditionnel passé. So we have our sujet, je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle. Then our pronom réfléchi, me, te, ce, nous, vous, ce. Then conjugation of être in conditionnel présent, serait, 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 serions, seriez, serait, serait. Then the participe passé of the verb. Here's an example with se coucher. So we have our sujet, then the pronom réfléchi, then être conjugated in conditionnel présent, then the participe passé of coucher, which is coucher. So it will be je me serais couché, tu te serais couché, il se serait couché, elle se serait couchée, nous nous serions couchés, vous vous seriez couché, il se serait couché, elle se serait couchée. Moving on to how reflexive verbs in conditional passé is conjugated in the negative form. So in this case, the reflexive pronoun comes after ne, conjugation of être comes after the reflexive pronoun, and the participe passé comes after pas. So the formation is sujet plus ne plus reflexive pronoun plus être conjugated in conditionnel présent plus pas plus the participe passé of the verb. For example, we have Je ne me serais pas réveillé tôt. I would not have woken up early. So in this case, our sujet is je, then we have ne, then the reflexive pronoun, which is me, then être conjugated in conditionnel présent, which is serait, then pas, then the participe passé of réveiller, which is réveillé. Now you may have noticed some extra letters at the end of the participe passés of the examples that we looked at. This is known as accord or agreement, and we'll be looking at how we do this in French. Verbs that are conjugated with être have an agreement with the subject. So in this case, the participe passé has an agreement with the subject. So if the subject is masculine, there is no accord. You don't add any extra letters, just the participe passé. If it's feminine, you add an e. If it's masculine and plural, you add an s. And if it's feminine and plural, you add an es. Let's take a closer look at the example with sortir. So we have je serais sorti without an accord since the sujet is masculine. However, if it was feminine, we would add an e at the end. Same rule applies for tu serais sorti. The sujet is masculine, however, if it was feminine, we would add an e. For il serait sorti, there is no accord since the sujet is masculine. Elle serait sortie, there is an accord, we add an e because the sujet is feminine. For nous serions sortis, we add an s at the end since the sujet is masculine. However, if it was feminine, we would add an es. Same rule applies for vous seriez sortis. Now for il serait sorti, we add an s at the end since the subject is masculine and plural. And for elle serait sortie, we add an es at the end since the subject is feminine and plural. Here are a couple of example sentences with conditionnel passé. Sarah serait entrée dans sa voiture. Sarah would have gotten into her car. In this case, we had an e at the end of entrée because the sujet is feminine. Lexi and Meredith seraient allés au centre commercial. Lexi and Meredith would have went to the mall. In this case, we had an es at the end since the sujet is feminine and plural. Now last one, Jake et Robert seraient retournés en Australie. Jake and Robert would have returned to Australia. In this case, we had an s at the end since the sujet is masculine and plural. And that's it for today's video. Merci tout le monde. À la prochaine.